Good morning from the West Coast, and I just concluded a very important RP-related program, and sorry for my delay in joining. And today we have a very important topic addressing how to protect our medical licenses, our livelihood. And we have some esteemed panel here, and they don't need any introduction, but they're really amazing leaders of API as well as leaders of medical fraternity across the country. And we have Dr. Yashwant Reddy from Ohio, Dr. Kishore Challa from West Virginia, Dr. Kamath also. And of course, my good friend, our CME chair, is going to conduct the program, moderate the program. Dr. Srini Gangasani is also involved with medical board in Georgia, and Dr. Suresh Gupta and Dr. Goyal as well. So without further ado, please go ahead and because we do get a lot of phone calls from our fraternity, our colleagues after the trouble starts and after it's too late to be able to help. So if we can prevent some of these issues to arise, I think we have done a good service to our members and our profession as well, our patient care as well. So it's a win-win situation if we follow these good practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi, for that introductory the speech. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to be the CME chair this year. First of all, I would like to thank all the speakers for taking time on this busy day to attend this webinar and then give their experiences, and all the members. I wish you all happy Shivratri on this Shivratri occasion. It was not planned to be done today, but it was supposed to be end of January, but due to some non-availability of some of the speakers, we had to change the date a few times, and it so happened on Mahashivratri. Now I think it's a good auspicious occasion. So I just want to update why I thought it would be a good session for all of us. So I'm currently serving as a member of a Georgia Composite Medical Board, along with my good friend Subra Bhatt. And Dr. Vinay Kamath was our first Indian member on the Georgia Composite Medical Board. And we learned a lot listening to Dr. Kamath whenever he comes to our GAPI meetings, and a lot of problems physicians face, some of them just because they didn't know the rules. So unfortunately, ignorance is no defense when come to the board rules. So early in my career, when I was attending a physician leadership academy class from Medical Association of Georgia, one of the board members came and gave a brief 10-minute speech that changed the way I changed my practice then on, because I didn't know some of the stuff, what I was doing. Like, if somebody asked me a prescription in the hospital, a nurse, not my patient, said, can you give me a Z-Pack? I used to give in the early part of my career. And then once I started listening to that 10-minute speech, I think it changed the way I started to change in my practice, because whether we like it or not, license is one of the most important positions we have in our practice. Doesn't matter how long we practice, how long we studied, how long we did the residencies, fellowship, but if we do not have a license, that's all waste. So I think it's important to keep our license. So from then on, I think I started looking at, okay, I need to educate our fellow physicians to see what to do. And even though I did many leadership roles in RP as a BOT, convention chair, GHS chair, and as a department chair in my health sales system, I think as a board member in the last 1.5 years, I think I'm helping my fellow physicians a lot more than what I've done in other roles. I feel like, I think that's the reason why I think we need to learn from these RP leaders, who are so many of them are in a very good position. They've been serving and they've served as a chairman of the multiple state boards. I think we need to get their experiences for us so that we can learn from their experiences. That is the goal of this meeting today. So let's talk to all these members to see what we can learn from their experiences so that we do not get into that kind of a situation in the future. I would like to introduce my fellow moderator, Dr. Suresh Gupta. I think he's very well-known internal medicine and a geriatrician from Maryland. So I think, let me put one thing. All the speakers today have CVs worth 4 to 5 pages minimum. Okay, if we just talk about their CVs, it's going to be the whole hour itself. So I want to briefly just mention, he worked as a board member for Maryland Board of Physicians from April 2008, and he was a vice chairman in 2016. And he had multiple positions in his practice of 44 years in Maryland. So he was a member of the Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission in Montgomery County from 2009 to current. And he was a National Council of Association, Indian Associations, NCAA Chairman, Board of Directors. So he was the president of the Greater Washington Association of Physicians of Indian Origin, chairman of the Quality Assurance Committee at the Holy Cross Hospital, and a vice chairman of the Department of Board of Medicine. So he will be introducing, and we will both will be helping with the answering the questions for everybody. So Dr. Gupta, if you want to say a few things, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Srini, such as eloquent, nice brief introduction. I appreciate and am grateful to you. It's my great privilege to see so many good friends who I've met before so many API meetings, API conventions. Nice to see Dr. Reddy, who I have privilege of knowing him, meeting him in Atlanta when Atlanta convention. I happened to attend one of his talks. And it's my great honor, privilege to ask to introduce him. Dr. Reddy is a graduate of Osmania Medical College. He's trained in Orthopedic School of Medicine, orthopedic surgery in UK, did residency in physical medicine and rehabilitation at Temple School of Medicine, University Hospital, and completed a pain fellowship in Wilmington, Delaware. A fellow of Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh and Royal College of Surgeons of Glasgow. Is board certified in PMR, pain medicine, and American Board of Intervention Spine Physicians. He is an international physiatrist and pain consultant, and with Ohio Health Physician Group in Columbus, Ohio for the past 2 decades. Very active in busy pain med practice, selected as top pain physician in Columbus for several years, and the treasurer of National API Convention in Columbus in 2018. Very active in national lecture circuit. Is a physician, currently board member of State Medical Board of Ohio and delegate to Federation of State Medical Boards, FSMB. Great privilege to know you. My friend, please share your experience so we all can learn and share with the newer generation of our API leadership and membership. Thank you.
Thank you, Suresh. Thank you, Srini. If I can have my slides. So instead of, if we can change the topic from 99 ways of losing the medical license to what does the medical board expect from you? It becomes very simple. Next slide, please. The objectives are many, but we'll go to the mission statement, slide number 3. Yeah, this is the one. So as a state medical board member, I have a duty to the public. And our duty and the mission statement is to protect and enhance the health and safety of the public through effective medical regulation. So our duty is to protect the public, not the physicians, unfortunately, but we do license them. Can we go to slide number 8? So in the state medical board, we have several core services. The first one is to issue license to all of you and renew them, investigate all the investigations, complaints we get, take disciplinary actions, monitor probationers, and also educate and outreach as we are doing today. Let's go to, if I can just say something, in 1 year, Ohio issues about 8,000 licenses. On the whole, we have about 55,000 physicians, and the board licenses 95,000 licensees. You have other people, but today we'll just limit ourselves to the medical professions. Let's go to slide 11, please. So a patient or a family member is not happy, so they file a complaint. And what happens once a complaint is filed? Slide 12, please. This is the most important slide each one of you will be seeing here. Let's just go through this. A complaint is received and the board, it is not in the board's jurisdiction. For example, the patient says, hey, the doctor charged too much money. It's not under the board, they'll close it. Other type of complaint is the doctor made me wait for 3 hours. The complaint will be closed. So the disciplinary actions by the board, which fall into the board, are then investigated. And the investigation is always not open to the public. The enforcement staff then develops the case and disciplinary action takes. For example, what you see here in the 4 reds, somebody has committed a mistake and they agree that they have committed a mistake, so they form a consent agreement with the board. If a complaint is issued or a citation is issued, they ask for a hearing, which means the person who committed that complaint wants to know more about it. So the hearing examiner, who is very independent and he listens both the parties and then presents it to the board. We on a monthly meeting look at that and amend or agree with what is happening. Similarly, there are several things which happen in the board. This is how the board functions. So the board has rules and the rules are made by the legislatures. Let's go to next slide, please. Next slide. For want of time, we're just going to skip some slides. So this is a very important slide. For example, in 2019, State Medical Board of Ohio received about 6,600 complaints. This is very regular. We get about 6,000 complaints a year. And unfortunately, in 2020, it went up to 7,000. So if you think about it, there are about 55,000 physicians in Ohio, but you're only getting 6,650 complaints. So it's not bad, right? So we are, for the most part, doing a great job. Next. If you see in 2019, only 275 physicians were punished out of 525 complaints, and this is less than, the complaints for less than 10% because there are 55,000 physicians. Next slide, please. So what kind of disciplinary actions do the board take? They can dismiss you, reprimand you, suspend you for a certain period, put you under probation, or will never allow you to practice again, which is the permanent revocation, which does happen in many cases. Next slide. So if you once again, I don't want you to be afraid of practicing medicine. If you look at the numbers, only very minimal numbers are bad apples. Majority of our physicians, and particularly in our state, they do a very, very good job. Out of 55,000 physicians, 275 punished. That's not bad, honestly. So you don't have to be afraid. As a state medical board, we are here to help you practice good medicine and stay out of trouble. Next, please. Professional behavior is a core competency expected of all the physicians. If you remember, I said, what does the state medical boards want from you? They need core competency from you. Next. So when do we take disciplinary actions? When the code of ethics of the AMA, AOA, or Podiatric Medical Association is violated, and there are many of those. Next. So let's look at some of the examples of the violations. This is again a very important slide here. So The first one is sexual misconduct. Do I have to tell anything about it? You should not even think, do, or act, or say something which is sexual to any of your colleagues or your patients. Fraudulent misrepresentation in the course of practice. This is billing too much. If some regulatory activity takes action against you, inappropriate prescribing of medications. This falls most commonly into prescription medications like which are controlled. And I am a pain physician, so I have to be very, very careful. Impairment, criminal actions or malpractice events, patient privacy, like for example, you're sharing patients' information on the internet. And of course, education and training. What does this mean? You are supposed to meet few CMEs every year. If you don't meet those, then that's a violation of the state medical board rules. Next, please. So again, look at the number of disciplinary actions. The percentage is high, but if you look at the numbers, if you take 55,000 physicians, the board actions are only minimal. So please don't be afraid. Do good medicine and nobody will get in touch with you. I just want to say something. If you drive below the speed limit, did any police officer come and stop you? Just think about it. If you go above 10, then the police officer may come, but many times we just escape, you see. So if you're lucky, you may escape, but just because you're lucky, don't think that you will escape all the time. Next slide. One of the things which gets us into trouble is prescribing. Next slide. If you prescribe controlled substances to your family or yourself, you're done for good. Drug convictions, like for example, you're selling drugs. Next slide. Professionalism is also very important. Next slide, please. So if you share any patient information on the social media, you will be in trouble. The other day, we had a plastic surgeon. She was doing liposuction and she was talking to the media. And that patient had a perforation. So when it came to the board, we had to take her license immediately. She was suspended and she will be revoked. So keep all your social media communications to your personal life, not professional life. Next. Telemedicine fraud. This was very, very rampant during the pandemic days. For example, this guy, he was prescribing braces. He never saw the patient, and some company was populating and he was prescribing braces left and right. And it came to us and he was permanently revoked. So telemedicine fraud is rampant. Be careful and keep away from the boards. I don't have to talk much about sexual misconduct because it's a very serious matter and your license will be lost immediately. Next. They're quite high, a total of 646, but each year you can see close to 200 sexual misconduct complaints, and majority of them lose their license. Next. So here is the thing. I'm sorry. So what does a sexual misconduct mean? Think about that. Expression of thoughts, feelings, or gestures. That will include a sexual misconduct. So professional behavior, not to talk anything about sexuality to your patients, is the best way to keep out of trouble. Next. 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 Impairment. Inability to practice according to the acceptable standards of care because of habitual or excess use or abuse of drugs, alcohol, or other substances that impair ability to practice. This is quite common. Next slide. Now look at on the right side. Nice decanter, nice glasses. Keep it to yourself personally in your personal life afterward. Don't bring this to your office or it will create quite a bit of trouble. Next. So in Ohio, we have a one bite program which is confidential. Let's say somebody is having a problem with drinking. So confidentially, you can call this number and they will help you. And the state medical board will not punish you for that, as long as you come up and you self-report your impairment. Next. Next. These are all the programs which we have here in Ohio, and all the other states also have it. Next. I'm sorry. So the state medical board also does confidential monitoring program. You know, nobody knows, but they do monitor how you're doing after the investigation has been done and the enforcement process is inactive. Next. So there are plenty of times where we get into trouble, particularly with prescriptions. For want of time, I will just tell you one case, which is 46, slide 46. So here is a physician who wanted to prescribe medications to his family. So love over law doesn't work. You cannot self-prescribe. You cannot prescribe to your family members or colleagues without having a chart. Just be careful. Next. Next one. This is a sexual misconduct case. The prescription was given and he wanted some unusual things from the patient. Can we go to 57? So in Ohio, this is a new thing, duty to report, which means that if you see any of your colleagues doing something wrong, you have a duty to report. So there are many other board members who will share their views. I will end my slides here for want of time, and we will take questions at the end. Thank you.
Srini, you're muted. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Yashwant, for that wonderful presentation. And that's a great beginning to, I think, overall, I think we all, I think at the board member levels, I think each state have a different rules, but in overall, I think the rules are pretty much similar. Maybe there are minor changes from one state to the other state. I think that's the reason why we have so many members from different states, so that they can give their perspective. That we'll take the questions, and if you have any questions, please do put in the chat box so that me and Dr. Gupta can entertain the questions with the speakers after. Our next speaker is my good friend and my Georgian, Dr. Vinay Kamath. He's a graduate of Indore Medical College in 1973. He currently working as a chairman emeritus at Medical College of Georgia in Augusta. He was a chairman of the director of the cardiovascular services from 2010 to 2018 at Medical College of Georgia. And 1988 to 2010, he was chief of cardiac and transplant surgery at the University Hospital in Augusta. with the team performing the first heart as well as first heart and lung transplant in states of Georgia and South Carolina. Very proud of you, Dr. Kamath, for all those achievements. He was also first member of Indian HAPI member, GAPI member to be on the Georgia Composite Medical Board. And I call him a trailblazer for all of us to be where we are right now, just because of what Dr. Kamath did. He also served as a board chairman for the Georgia Composite Medical Board. He's also past president of American Heart Association, director of United Way of Georgia, and is the founding patron of Hindu Temple Society of Augusta. Thank you, Dr. Kamath, for agreeing to give this the talk. I think when I first talked to him in, St. Augustine a few months ago, I think that's when I was like, we've been planning this meeting for January since then. And I think, Dr. Kamath, we are looking forward to listening to your views. Also, the topic came from Dr. Kamath's next book, 99 Ways to Lose the Medical License, is the book being written by Dr. Kamath. I think that's the title from. Thank you for let us use the title for this webinar, Dr. Kamath. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gangasani. Actually, it's a pleasure, and I'm humbled to share the screen with such eminent people as those on the panel. And much of my experience, as you see, is from being on the Georgia State Medical Board. But something that was striking, and Dr. Reddy mentioned it very elegantly, is oftentimes physicians get into trouble for not knowing what they should know. And if you look through all the books and literature available, there is not much of information on what happens across the country. You may find some information state-wise. So back in 2008, a 10-year project, when I was working to analyze why people lose their licenses. And that was the impetus for starting the book. And what we saw was really nothing surprising, but yet almost it was like a tragedy happening, unfolding. We are such highly educated, highly passionate members of society, but yet somewhere we miss out. So next slide, please. Slide, please, next. So this is mostly for lay people, but it varies from state to state. And most boards are appointed by the government, governor, or the legislature, or the society, medical societies. And these are highly, highly experienced people, highly respected. And the charge, at least in Georgia, is there to protect and enhance public health by regulating, licensing, and disciplining. And each state has something similar in their charter. What's slightly different in some states is that they hold the physician or the provider to a higher standard, that of highest moral and ethical standards, in the sense that becomes, all of a sudden, it becomes subjective. And when I was the chairman, we decided that we really cannot be subjective, and we have to define what's moral and ethical standard, because if not, then we get open to the charge of possibly not being very sort of accurate in our promulgations. So the important part is that oftentimes the board is accused of being arrogant, being arbitrary, but yet these are really dedicated people. They all are pro bono. They do this as a service to the public, and they have seen it all. Next, please. So we looked at 124 cases, consecutive cases of revocation, suspension, probation. And I chose 99 for the diversity and points of interest. And they had, and it was astounding as to how many times people made a mistake in their own presentation to the board. And the board would come out with a different impression of the case. So the book was all about how to protect yourself and making that the first priority and what not to say, what to say across the field of different specialties. And one of the things that struck me and struck many of my reviewers was that this could have happened to me, despite all my efforts. And this is an easy trap to fall into. So when you say that you are innocent, and you are most likely innocent, but to prove it becomes harder. And again, as Dr. Reddy said, if you can slow down a little bit in your practice, you are less likely to make an error. Next, please. So in Georgia, at least 50% of the cases are generally closed. And we have a system called the letter of concern. And then another 25 are scheduled for further action. And these things can drag on for years and certainly cause a lot of agony and grief to the physicians. Next, please. So for revocation and across the board, immediate revocation is if you are a danger to the public or yourself. So that's the number one cause that we noticed in almost 20% of cases where the physicians were just absolutely not allowed to practice even for 24 hours. And of course, then on, it's about the compromised provider, and you can see the list. And there will be some overlap between me and all the other respected speakers today. But I want to point out that an important aspect of going on revocation or suspension is repeat violation. Repeat violations. And it's hard for me to fathom why would people go into all the trouble of getting education and starting a practice and still get into trouble. But yet there it was. And not to behold the point, my book was going to publication 1922 spring, but I had to stop it because the COVID changed everything. The kind of cases coming in, the kind of issues being dealt with on the board across the country. So I wanted it to be more relevant. So it's on hold for right now, but still, it was quite a finding. And important part of the COVID, and I'm sure somebody else will also address it, is the compromised provider. Either because of alcohol, depression, financial issues, especially small practices. And at least in Georgia, and Dr. Gangasamy can provide us more information about it, the setup for complaints has changed tremendously, going towards more hospital-based professions rather than private practice physicians. Next, please. Deep down, we all know what not to do, I think. Sometimes there are errors we don't know about, but in most cases or many cases, there are things that we know we should not be doing. Either it's sexual misconduct, especially in surgeons' cases, having cutting corners. So we have to watch our team. And one thing, hopefully somebody else will bring it up, is the electronic medical record. As many of you know, I've been consulting across the country on various cardiac surgery cases, vascular surgery cases. And the EMR is not necessarily your friend because the volume of publication and volume of information is such that you are possibly going to miss something important. One other thing that stands out, at least for physicians, is that we are so busy in our practices that we are not paying attention to social causes, where you are viewed as somebody who is not paying attention to patients, the families, or society in general. So my plea is invest some in social causes where board will take into account if you have an error, if you have a minor error, or even a major error, that you are a good citizen and you did your best. Next, please. What we saw also was there were many problems, especially if you are in a small practice, and that is mid-levels, portals. If you're not promptly and if you're not adequately responding to patients' issues. And Dr. Reddy mentioned fraud in telemedicine. It's rampant. It's rampant. There are no written rules in many states, and it's just becoming a free for all. In surgery, at least, we found that if you have a large organization, large number of physicians, handovers across weekends are a major cause of problems. And it's surprising how we don't get into trouble more often, because the handovers are so sloppy. And finally, last few years, many of my colleagues and across states have gotten into trouble because of social and political issues. That's something that the boards will have to address, because the complaints keep piling up. Next, please. And in many of the private practice offices, staffing and manpower issues are getting so overwhelmingly a problem that something or else is falling through the crack. And again, if you slow down, perhaps, because you'll avoid any kind of serious errors. Last 2-3 years, the complaints have moved more towards intensive care, physicians, emergency room physicians, critical care, and really moving towards more hospital-based charges. One of the problems we're seeing from last 1 year is private equity is moving into our field. And what happens is they have their own priorities. And it's going to come more and more frequently that there'll be clashes between what's physicians' priority and what physicians' licenses are exposed to, and that what the private equity bosses want to do. Good problem is that because of life and work balance issues, most physicians, younger physicians, have really slowed down where they could. So they're not getting into as much trouble as somebody from my generation. I'm probably the oldest in the panel here. And because of slowing down, they're getting less exposed to possible errors. Now, in many states, New York, I don't see anyone from New York, but New York, Texas, and Florida, the frontline providers have been protected, and the boards are looking again into modifying their own rules and regulations to protect the frontline providers. And that's going to help a lot in the emergency room and intensive care. Next, please. We have almost 1.1 million physicians in this country. And in 2021, there were only nine outright revocations. And another 3, I think, are going to come to revocation pretty soon. But that's a tiny percentage. And it's gratifying, as Dr. Reddy said, and Dr. Gangasani mentioned, that we all are doing a fantastic job. And we hope to stay out of trouble. But that's not granted. And Another striking feature was that employed physicians, whether they're hospital employed, academic, VA, are nowhere to be seen on the revocation scale. So it protects if you are part of a larger organization. And at least just looking at the number of lawsuits from law journals that have been charting and they've been monitoring this, there's been a big drop. Now, whether it's because of COVID, we don't know that, but 2021, that was a significant drop in malpractice suits. Next, please. One thing, since we are in an organization, I would like to point out that the second generation is really doing a very good job of staying out of trouble. And they're moving up at the ladder, they are up in the chairman position, leading leaders in their institutions, and they are conducting themselves very well in the public side. And I'm really grateful for that initiative and doing the right thing. And if you look at the whole spectrum, I can guarantee you can hardly find a second generation that's in trouble. And I don't know why, but maybe better slower work-life style issue, whether they are more cognizant of problems that they can get into, or maybe they are just employed physicians. But they are doing a marvelously good job. And we really have to acknowledge that things are changing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kamath, for that excellent presentation. I know, I think it's reassuring for many of the people that, even though I think both, Dr. Reddy and you talked about, I think so many complaints come through, but it says only a fraction of it. I think we still see in Georgia Medical Board right now, we get about 150 to 200 complaints every month. But out of those, very few of them are really have an issue to be concerned about. I think it's a reassuring, but I think we learned a lot. I think being on the board versus practicing 23 years as a cardiologist versus in the last 1 year, I learned a lot more what issues the members can face. And I think this is kind of a really eye-opener for a lot of the members out there. There are a lot of good questions. We'll be discussing those questions. But before we go to the questions, I think I have two other speakers. The next speaker is our good friend, Arvind Goyal from Chicago. Is the medical director of the Illinois Department of Healthcare and Family Services for the last 10 years. Dr. Goyal has clinical oversight of quality, policy, utilization, and managed care services for 3.6 million Medicaid and CHIP enrollees. So he's a clinical associate professor in Department of Family Medicine, Preventive Medicine at Chicago Medical School, and he also sees patients in the pre-clinic. He completed as a chair of the National Medicaid and Medical Directors Network, and had the honor of previously serving as numerous medical leadership positions, including chair of Illinois Medical Licensing Board, Family Health Foundation of Illinois, president of Illinois State Medical Society, Chicago Medical Society, Northwest Community Staff, Medical Staff, American Association of Public Health Physicians, and many more. And he was recognized as so many by like Physician of the Year Award, Top Doctor Award, like Chicago, Heart of the Chicago Award. So, but I think while his numerous filings have provided continuous challenges, his strategic thinking and sense of humor have earned him many friends, especially for me. I know as a speaker of many of the governing body meetings for API I attended, he has been a great speaker. And I think with his sense of humor, I think he has done a wonderful job. Thank you, Dr. Goyal, for agreeing. And Dr. Goyal is going to enlighten us about the credentialing issues, what we go through apart from the board, but I think he's also on the other side. I think from credentialing point of view, he's going to speak about the credentialing issues too. Thank you, Dr. Goyal.
Thank you, Dr. Gangasni. I appreciate that. And my regards and honor to AAPI President, Dr. Kohli, who's on the line, and co-panelists, all the attendees, good morning. I want to talk about some cases that I encountered either as a board member or in various other capacities, some of them as expert on part of some physicians who needed to be defended before the licensing or disciplinary boards in Illinois. So I thought it would be very helpful for me to talk about some illustrative cases. And if I can, Dr. Gangasni, so I don't lose track of time, if you can give me some sort of a buzz at 8 minutes, I would really appreciate it, and I'll close within a minute. So I want to talk about a few cases. The first case I want to talk about is case of a neurosurgeon. Let us call him Dr. A.A., just anonymously. He admitted a 2-year-old child from an emergency room call with a history of head trauma and with a CT finding of intracranial bleed. He admitted in the middle of the night, Sunday night, I remember the case. The mother was advised that we need to look, see how bad the bleeding is, if it's continuing or not, and the patient needs to be taken to surgery. Mother requested a second opinion. The second opinion came 6 hours later. The patient was still stable and observation was recommended. That started a tirade on the part of patient's mother, writing to the hospital board, writing to the hospital CEO, going out in the community newspaper, even showed up at the Christmas party of the hospital medical staff, standing at the door, passing out pamphlets, calling him all kinds of names, butcher and everything else you can think of. So in a response, instead of doing something else, Dr. A.A. went on social media, did not name the patient. I gave him credit for that. However, he described the case and he sent out letters to hospital colleagues who referred to him, etc. And eventually, the mother complained to the medical licensing and disciplinary boards both to take away his license and to discipline him because he had violated patient's privacy and discussed the case in public. So I was called in as a consultant by the doctor's attorney as an expert. And during the hearings, of course, we explained that at that time, this was a reaction that occurred and he had to defend his professional standing, practice, and everything else. So in any case, the board issued a reprimand, told him to back off, not do anything like that. Again, the learnings from this case, and of course, Dr. A.A. moved to Florida. I mean, when people in Illinois get fed up with anything other than weather, they move to Florida. So never violate any sort of personal, private health information, even indirectly if you can help it. It would have been nicer if he had taken some steps to undo the defamation that had been done, either through the legal system or through reputation defending companies, which there are plenty. And I do believe that it is always nice in cases like this to involve your professional liability insurer very early because they can advise what to do. They can also raise your premium, that's the danger, but I think they can help. Second case I want to talk about, it's always stayed with me, is a person, a medical student who was about to graduate and had a conviction on his record for dealing with opioids. He did not disclose that on the application. He was applying for a temporary license. And of course, the boards normally do a background check, criminal background check, and it turned up a very brief, like a 1 or 2 night jail stay and conviction. And with intent to deny, he was called in. At that time, he admitted that in order to keep himself sane from all the things that happen in medical education, he had taken some drugs. And then he got interested in selling opioids at that time, some 20 years ago, because that way he could pay for his medical school tuition and graduate without a debt. So eventually he admitted he had made mistakes. Eventually he entered into a consent order, checking for opioids, this, that. And the board very kindly agreed that at the end of his residency will be happy to review all his records, references, etc., performance. And if he appealed for expungement of those records, he will not have to stay all his professional life with that denial or intent to deny, if you would, and reprimand, etc. So important learnings from that case is, number one, as was said earlier, don't do it. Don't do drugs. Don't sell drugs. Don't overprescribe drugs if you can help it. Of course, this was only a medical student. Do not lie on the application. If it is a conundrum, consult an attorney before you fill the application. And I want to say that there are good attorneys and there are bad attorneys as well, just like in any profession. So please check it out. The other thing is that you need to be aware of the process right from the beginning and use it to your advantage, especially when you're applying for something in the government records. Third case I want to talk about is the case of a sexual abuse complaint by a patient who was 17 at the time. She had started seeing Dr. CC, a neurologist, at age 16. Initially, she came in with her mother, and eventually she would come by herself and with no office staff in the room. The neurologist was also accused of having done breast exams, gynae exams, etc., which were relatively inappropriate for his specialty. Although his documentation was the patient complained of some issues in those areas. There were frequent visits. There was some documentation that he had made some advances for socialization, etc., some intimacy. One complaint by that patient resulted in about 20 more from everybody else who thought they could get money or notoriety of some sort. God knows. Some of them were undocumented. A couple of those even turned up where there was no documentation they had ever seen the doctor as a professional. The appeals went nowhere. The license remains taken away at this moment, and it's been at least 10 years. So the learnings from this case: always invite a family member or a chaperone for intimate exams, male or female. Remember that we live in a society where it could turn either way. Documentation for examinations. In this case, the neurologist had said, hey, there wasn't a gynae in my area, so I did whatever I needed to do. You need to document that. You need to do everything you can to make an effort to steer the patient to the right one. Keep
Goel,
a
2 more minutes.
professional distance.
2 more minutes.
Yes,
Thank you.
keep a professional distance from patients at all times. And it was said before more eloquently, but I think it needs to be emphasized. There have been cases where physicians have decided that they wanted to develop some relationship with the patients. So they have asked those patients to move away from their practices, given it some cooling time. So they are no longer their established patients. They are with somebody else, documented. And then maybe it is permissible for you to go forward. I would basically just mention 3 additional cases, not discuss them, One is a case where a physician, a primary care, took bribes from a home health agency. Indefensible. There was, wire all over the place. 18 months in the jail. He's out, drove a cab for a long time, and recently got a probationary license. Another case where a surgeon had documented more surgeries than he had performed, a vascular surgeon, for upcoding purposes. Years later, this patient ended up with somebody else, found out that the surgery that was in the operative report was never done. This person spent 2 years in the jail and could never get a license back. Finally, I want to say that one hospital, when they lost their revenue due to some rule changes, could not hold the patients too long in the hospital for detoxification or withdrawal from drugs or alcohol. We found out that there were 30 tracheostomies per month since the rule was changed. Prior to the rule change, it was about 1 or 2, just like in any community hospital. And then the CEO, the CFO, all the doctors involved who were referring these patients from nursing homes and doing unnecessary trachs, they've spent time in the jail or are currently spending time in the jail. I would stop, appreciate your questions, appreciate your patience, and thank you again for putting me on this very learned panel.
Dr. Gupta, go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. It's nice to hear from experts and good speakers like Dr. Reddy, Dr. Kamath, and Dr. Goyal, who I met before. Look forward to meeting you. In my own experience, being at the State Board of Maryland for 8 years, from 2008 to 16, there are some 2 terms, the more or less experience is all same kinds of complaints, same kinds of reprimand, same kinds of law. But what I've seen mostly physician get in trouble is greed and creed, really. And love over law, prescription you mentioned, Dr. Reddy, love over law is very common. So anyhow, it's my great honor to introduce the next speaker. Dr. Challa, Kishore Challa, is a good friend of ours. He's an interventional cardiologist and chief of cardiologists at Thomas Hospital, West Virginia University. He practiced for the last 33 years. He's immediate past president of West Virginia Board of Medicine, very senior most member of West Virginia Board of Medicine, multiple accolades and awards, including Heart of Gold Award from American Heart Association, distinguished West Virginian Award from Governor of West Virginia, special recognition in U.S. Senate services to West Virginia by Senator Manchin in the archives of U.S. Senate. Very good. Past Chief of Staff of the hospital, presently on Board of Directors of Thomas Hospital, West Virginia University, member of Executive Committee of Board of Medicine, and president partner at South Charleston Cardiology. My good friend, my great honor to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Kishore Challa. Thank you, please.
Thanks a lot for the kind introduction, Dr. Gupta. And Srini and Ravi, thank you for including me in the panel. And as my 3 predecessors said, there's not much more things to add. At the same time, I'll go to the basic rules, basic common sense stuff, so that, and then we'll open it for questions. Most important thing is, don't be afraid of losing your license. That happens only to people who do not take care of themselves and who are very, very greedy. Not quite often people don't lose licenses. If you go to the 6th slide for me, please, 6th or 7th. Go down, 2 more. Okay. Now the question is, what draws the attention of the State Medical Board and what steps can you take to ensure you meet the professional and ethical responsibilities as a licensed physician? If you can go to the next one, please. first step is a complaint. What are the ways a doctor is being complained on to the Board of Medicine? Quite often, most of the complaints are submitted by the patients or patient's family, and for unprofessional and dishonorable conduct. Go to the next one again. This is, I think, most important here is first thing is the license application. Make sure you do your license application yourself. There are small things which might be inadvertent and which might be too small, but that will get you on the radar of the board. First thing is when you're doing the license application, most important, when you do the check marks, one of the questions would be, do you have enough CME, 50 hours for 2 years in our state? And the second thing which people don't understand is 3 hours of opioid or drug divergence training. So if you check, and this 50 hours of CME should be in the cycle of the licensing, the 2 years. People lose track of the time, and when they check the mark, and obviously 10% of all the licenses get audited for CME, not everybody. And once you're audited, and that's a red flag. Before, I was the president for the Board of Medicine for 4 years, and every month in the board, on the board website, they would give who got reprimanded. So I really worked hard and said that the CME should not be included in the same category of sexual misconduct, etc. So that got out of the board's website, just saying that these people were reprimanded for CME. And the second thing which people always forget is a lawsuit. And if your name is in the data bank and you have a lawsuit against yourself, you have to report it. And it's not when you are sued, but when you got settled. Like somebody had a lawsuit 5 years ago and gets settled this year, it should be mentioned on this cycle. Again, Dr. Reddy has said a lot about sexual misconduct and we had a similar example of a very, very successful gastroenterologist who was going into the wrong spaces to do colonoscopies. And he got caught, and then in fact, he's in jail right now because there are 7 or 8 civil lawsuits and criminal lawsuits also. Next one is the prescribing issues. As Srini said, do not prescribe unless you have a chart. And quite often what happens is patients call in the middle of the night, hey, I need these prescriptions. None of those prescriptions, if they're life-saving, just give them for 3 days. And when you go back to the office, give those prescriptions again. But never, never, never give any narcotics or opiates to anybody without proper document. Again, the substandard care also. I think the standard of care has to be met in every department, and the outcomes will show for itself. And if there is a pattern on any of the physicians, it will be reported to the board. Go to the next one again, please. As I said, fill up the license application form yourself. This is very, very important, especially for small practices where you have your office manager do the licensing application and sign off on it. And that's where a lot of people get complained on. Can I have the next again, please? Again, all this were already discussed by Dr. Reddy and the other panel members. Just be careful. I mean, don't take anything for granted. And obviously, every board of medicine in this country, their main goal is to protect the public and not the physician. So we have to give the benefit of doubt to the patient and That's basically where it comes from. Go to the next one again, please. Again, medical records is very important, not only for medical board, for medical lawsuits also. Never go back and change your medical records. If you have to put an addendum, just put another addendum. Talk to this patient and did this, but never delete anything and don't change your medical records. Again, be nice. I mean, we just had to be courteous. As I always tell my patients, my dad gave me an advice when I graduated from medical school. He said, treat every patient as if you're treating me. You'll never go wrong. And I still do the same, follow the same principles. And so far, so good. Next one again, please. I guess that might be the last slide. I think I can be more valuable in answering the questions because I've been on the board for 10 years and I'm the senior most member. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Challa, for that wonderful practical points. I think that's where I think we get the maximum benefit apart from knowing the rules versus those practical points. I think one other thing I add is I think we need to remember to renew our licenses. On medical board, I've seen so many times, I think we think our office or somebody is going to take care of it, but ultimately it's our responsibility. And if we don't renew it on time and with all the CMEs, what needs to be done, I think ultimately we will be under like a problem from the board because you're practicing without a license, and that is not good for the physician. So I think we're going to take some questions. I think I'm going to go through some of the questions. Me and Dr. Gupta will ask the questions to the panel. So I think this is for Yashwant. I think from Dr. Badaria. Is this number available to public or a physician? What is the type of disciplinary actions on these cases? I think you were talking about a number being available to give the other physicians if there is a complaint about other physicians. I think that is a question.
Yes. You know, every state medical board has a monthly publication about the actions taken. So this is all public information. I'm not certain you will get any statistics from it, but if you follow the state medical board website, you will get to know those things.
Yeah, if it's a public consent, it will be available. If it's a private consent, it's not going to be. I think, yeah, we can get those. And the next question is, I think, could you comment on professional courtesy, part of the Hippocratic Oath? I don't know, Dr. Kamath.
Say, the important part is don't be a jerk. It's that simple. And what happens is that either we are under work pressure or whatever, we tend to ignore that basic concept. It has become quite common, though, if a hospitalist admits a patient and asks for a consultant's opinion, it may take hours. It's totally unnecessary. A lot of simple, courteous things can keep us out of trouble. And the sad part, what happens is that it becomes a sort of a way of the world to be more important than this and that and ignore requests. The important part is to treat the referring physician or your colleague, as someone said, as you treat your dad. You know a lot more in your field, but he or she knows a lot more in their respective field. And it's unfortunately getting more and more common that you become rude and I wouldn't say abusive, but it's a very unpleasant experience. The electronic medical record somehow protects you, but so often you are interacting in person. And so it really boils down to not being a jerk.
Thank you. So a lot of questions about
not being timely. That's a very important part because you are leaving your colleague in a limbo, which is really not a good thing to do.
Thank you. So a lot of questions about the self prescribing or prescribing to the family members. I know the rules are different in different states. At least in Georgia, I think you can give urgent non-narcotic prescription for 3 days, only in emergencies, only for 3 days. That's the Georgia law. But I think every state have their own laws. So I think you need to know what your state law is if you want to prescribe it. I think any other comments from Dr. Goel or Dr. Challa?
Yeah, I mean, prescribing, bottom line is don't prescribe anything without a chart. Okay. You need to have a doctor-patient relationship. I mean, and then don't prescribe anything for your family. I mean, I think nobody is going to get after you for giving CPAC to your wife on a Saturday when she's having cold or something like that. But we are talking about especially narcotics and opiates or scheduled substances. Never, never, never. Especially sleeping pills, and a lot of people, I mean, just give Cialis and Viagra for people who don't have a chart. A dog, can you send it? Bottom line is you need to establish a physician-patient relationship before you prescribe anything.
Including diet pills and stimulants these days as well.
Yeah, I agree with Ravi. I think we had a case recently in Georgia. I was reviewing a licensing committee as a part of the thing. One of the orthopedic surgeons gave a diet pill to one of his sister because he was forcing him because some wedding was coming up. This was like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Now he's applying to Georgia. He was reprimanded in his own state. So we had to call him for an interview. When I asked him, so what did you learn? He said, my dad used to be a general physician. He used to treat us all the time. So I thought I could treat my patient, my family too. So I didn't know the rule that I couldn't give. So he was kept giving for like 2-3 months. So he got into trouble. But I learned my lesson. I'm never giving any prescription to family members. So that's, I think we don't want to be in a situation of where learning, I think I would learn from somebody else's experience. And unless there's emergency, please do not. And Dr. Challa said, no chart, no prescription. Yashwant.
So,
Can I add to that discussion, Dr. Gangasani?
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Goel.
The family prescriptions we have, or we had until recently when I last checked, a friends and family license. You could retire from your regular practice, but you could apply for a friends and family license, meaning you are treating your family. The only thing that I agree with the panelists, but I disagree in discouraging people from prescribing for their own family except controlled substances. I understand that. But you need to document. I mean, you've already established that they are your patients. So please make a small note on your computer, on your iPhone, however you want to do it, so that when the board comes after you, that you prescribe for your family, there's nothing that stops you from calling yourself a doctor to your family members. Just wanted to put that in the right perspective.
Yashwant.
so just as you already said, the laws differ from state to state. In the state of Ohio, you cannot prescribe anything but emergency medicines to your family members. I saw a note, somebody asking a question about what about antibiotics? Maybe for a very, very short period, you have to have a physician-patient relationship, even with your family member, beyond 2 or 3 days. Nobody is asking you not to treat your family, as long as you have a patient-physician relationship. And about the opioids, as Kishore was mentioning, it's a no-no. You just cannot prescribe opioids. That's where you will get into trouble. Ask your friends. They can, in the state of Ohio, write opioids on telemedicine for a very short period if he is a resident of Ohio. But in 3 days, that patient needs to see you or another physician. Very simple rules.
Dr. Gupta. Dr. Gupta.
I just have a comment. We have 196 people attending this our discussion. Nice to hear from such expert. Here's my experience at the board. Just FYI, there are 50 states 50 MD boards. There are 20 states have DO boards as well. So there are 50 plus 20 plus 1 DC board. So there are 71 boards, 1, 2, 3. There are 1 million plus physicians. There are about 634 board members, at least that used to be when I was there 6 years ago. Board member, not that control the board, they sit on the board and serve the country. Really, we are not arrogant people, we are friendly people. So it is we work very hard, children to go to college, have education. It is good to have a license. The lesson here is to keep the license. Learn what we should not do. FSMB is going to introduce something in our curriculum that children, what they should not do. That is why our younger generation, as Dr. Goel said, are not getting into trouble. My own son is a neurosurgeon. He's 41. So our children don't think the way we think. We are greed and creed, sort of Indian American. So we need to educate our children. It is my request to Dr. Kohli in our RP convention in Philly or in future. We shall spend a lot of time in this CME education, licensing and board. It should be a good panel discussion for 2, 3, 4 hours. If you want the main program, not a 30-minute discussion on a side panel. Yes, we can learn a lot, teach a lot, share a lot, but we know what we know. It's just a few comments to the audience and my good friends on the table. Thank you.
I just want to say one more point. It might be really rhetorical at this point because most of the prescriptions are e-prescriptions, but still some people write prescriptions on the pad. Never, never, never leave a signature on a prescription without anything written on it. I've seen so many people get into trouble for that. Doesn't matter. Never have an open prescription signed by you without any name, date, or any drug written on it.
I have a question in general. A lot of us are out of enthusiasm or otherwise going out of our core competencies and doing a lot of things that may not even actually require licenses. And I don't know how the public is being protected or at least educated about these medical professions using their prestige or name to promote certain other things like products or services or procedures. I know it's a very tricky thing. It's an entrepreneurial kind of aspect of practice of medicine these days. What's your general take on it? I just want to throw it out there.
Who wants to go first on this?
Sorry,
I can start the discussion. Like you cannot advertise for anybody as a physician. In fact, even the billboards and all they're there. The hospital puts your billboards everywhere. Even that, they need to take your permission and signature and consent. And do not promote any product, even though you use it a lot, because again, that goes with the fact that the kickbacks will come there. And even if they bring a lunch to your office, they bring the lunch, but it goes on your name. And it says that Chala got $1,000 on this day, even though it's no money exchange. But we need to be very, very careful and smart with that.
Thank you, Kishore.
So I just saw, I was going through the questions. One of the questions was, how can we get involved with the state medical boards? That's a very, very nice question. I encourage all of you to sit on the state medical boards, not only to learn for yourself, but also help the community you're living in. It takes a lot of time. I am telling you, it's your personal time. I get paid peanuts, but it's worth your time. I encourage anyone who is interested to sit on the state medical boards.
But generally, they're political appointments, right, by the governor.
No. I will put a small addendum to that, Yashwant. It's how to get appointed to the medical board. That itself is a big topic by itself. The best way is like, I mean, not bragging about myself, but the last 7 appointees to our medical board were my suggestions to the governor's office. And you just send your resume to the governor's office that you want to serve the community. It's time for you to pay back in this capacity. Send your resume. And actually, if you have anybody on the medical board who is your friend or your colleague, just tell them to put in a word with the board administrator. And it should not be too hard to get on the medical board as long as your intentions are good and you send the paperwork and your resume and your cover letter with that.
Thank you. There was a lot of questions about, I think when the question, when there is an inquiry from the board, what do you need to do? I think the one thing, if you get a letter from the board, please respond in a nice way. I know we're all busy with our own practices, but I think it's nice because if you don't answer, it's only going to go to the next level, and that almost you're committing whatever the disciplinary action or complaint about. So please take time, whatever you can. Please send a reply back, inquire about whatever the question or the patient was asking about, what was the trouble, whatever the board is asking about. Please take 5 minutes and 10 minutes, whatever the time it takes. Please reply to the board so that will give you time. The second thing is, if you call for an interview, please go for an interview. I think I'll tell you, as a Georgia Medical Board, we are trying to protect the physicians as well as the patients. I know we're there to protect the patients more so, but I think I think pretty much every board member wants to look at themselves as what they would do if they're in their shoes, what the other person is doing it. So I think, but go for an interview, I think, just so that you can tell your side of the story, what happened, so that it's not going to be a big problem for the future.
I mean, just for the information, boards are consisting of not only physician, patient advocates, lawyers, priests, and everybody. So it's a representation of the entire society.
Just to elaborate on that, I don't know about every board, but FSMA, when they meet, we exchange how the boards sit in different states. In Maryland state, where I am, there are 22 board members. There are 8 consumer members, 14 physician members. And physicians are of different specialties, so they all don't think alike. Neurosurgeon, OBGYN, medical. So there's an attorney, there might be a teacher, there might be a panhandler. So every consumer has a right to be on the board as well, because they don't think the physician is protecting the physician. They are giving their unbiased opinion. So there are consumer board members as well, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question about, a lot of questions about the self-prescribing and prescribing when you're traveling internationally, or self-prescriptions, family prescriptions. So I think there are a lot of questions. I don't know, I think Dr. Challa, so I know you talked about it a little bit. I think, can you comment on self-prescribing, close family members for thyroid medicine or something which is non-narcotic, what to do? Again, the rules are different for different states, but I think in general, if you can reiterate one more time. Try
to avoid self-prescribing. Okay? I mean, even though you know the pharmacist and all, just, I mean, in the middle of you, as a physician, you have enough friends or you have a primary care, let them take care of it. And for families, immediate family or anybody, just a course of antibiotic, I don't think anybody will come after you. At the same time, I mean, don't make it a habit. If you have 10 family members and you start prescribing to all of them, no. And even if you have a partner, let him be the physician for your family, rather than you take care of your family as a physician. That's not only good for the medical board, but it's good for your sanity also. You don't want to deal with your family as a patient. Let somebody competent to take care of it. But try to avoid, I mean, really, it's not a big deal. I mean, maximum you have a long weekend, right? After that, Monday is another day. So just some antibiotic is okay, I think. And especially with the COVID, as a cardiologist also, I prescribed a lot of Paxlovid. Okay, and just document, I mean, the guy, one of your patients has COVID, you call in the prescription, you go the next day, or I have access to my EMR at home. I just put a note, he called in with positive COVID and I prescribed this medication. That will be the end of the story. Because you never know what complications, I mean, all these pills, we just can't write because every pill has a contraindication. like renal failure or liver abnormalities and all. If you don't know that and start prescribing, once you get into an adverse effect, that's even a different ballgame altogether.
Dr. Chella, on the same topic, there's another question. If anesthesiologists, pathologists who are not practicing medicine, can they write prescriptions to their family or like friends?
I don't think they can have a chart with these patients. Okay, for a pathologist, there's no, I don't think so.
Can I interrupt here?
Sure, please.
A radiologist, an anesthesiologist, or a pathologist is a physician first, and then he became a specialist. So by that, you could prescribe, but again, it goes back to you need to have a chart, a physician-patient relationship. If it is an emergency, yes, but long-term, you cannot do that.
Thank
Can
you.
I also
Ishwant, yeah.
answer one more question? See, can you prescribe to your patients when you're traveling internationally? That's a very good question. You're going to India and your patients call you. Can you prescribe?
I mean, I guess first thing is you should not don't even answer your phone when you're traveling. I mean, that's your vacation time and you have enough coverage, let them take care of it.
Okay, so Yashwant, I have a question about, I think for you, I think for your topic, there is a couple of questions about what is your responsibility if one of your colleagues is impaired to complain to the board, and how easy or difficult. I think in Georgia, I think we have, I think an easy way. I think you need to complain. If you know that there is somebody's impaired and practicing, I think it can come back to you that, you know the problem, but you didn't complain. You may get a disciplinary action also because you're not complaining. But I think Yashwant, if you can give it, I think
that is very, very true. And that's why it's called duty to report. If you see a colleague and you see that he's I'm sorry. So you need to find out or inform the board and let them investigate. Then you covered yourself. That is what in the state of Ohio we mean by duty to report. If you do not report and they find out that you did not report, you are liable.
We tend to say, if you see something, say something. If you see the rape, you have to witness the rape, you have to report the rape. So if you see something, say something. That's the answer.
Okay,
Yeah.
Great. I think, thank you for that excellent, I know there are a few more questions, but I think we are already at that time. I think we need to recognize, I think, Vijay, can I share my slide for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I just want to give you like 2 seconds of so your license grants you privilege, not a right to practice medicine. So be cautious, be thorough. Remember that patients' lives depend on you. So protect your license. That's very important. And these are my 7 issues and problems I see. I know this is what we went through all of it, but these are the kind of 7 points I think you need to remember every day when you're doing it. No romantic relationship with the patient, even with a consent. I think even the intention of a romantic relationship is also a problem. We have seen the cases getting people into trouble with the fines and the consents against the doctors. And we talked about, I think, prescriptions, writing prescriptions to family and friends. I think we went through already so many times. Not using the chaperones. I think Dr. Goel mentioned it. I think any kind of, you're in doubt, use a chaperone because it's going to be your word against the patient word. I think always, I think if you're in doubt, definitely using the chaperone is very important. And reviewing the charts without doctor-patient relationship also got into trouble. Few of the doctors in the state, what I have seen so far, and sharing your passwords with your staff to get the information from the hospital system also got doctors into trouble. And one of the doctors actually recently got reprimanded for that. And then the DUI. So I think the DUI is different for non-physicians versus physicians. So absolutely DUI is kind of a really high risk for the physician. So please just stay away from the DUI kind of a cases. Thank you. I think, Vijay, I think you can recognize our speakers for Ravi. If you can take a few minutes of, I think, final closing statement and close with recognizing the speakers.
Yeah, again, I want to thank you for this timely topic, especially with electronic medical records and telemedicines and everything in the horizon and right in front of us. So we need to practice very diligently and very carefully, and not only the patients' lives depend on us, our livelihoods. We, like Srini reiterated many times, we work our lifetime to get our privileges. Don't take it for granted. So protect it like your core asset. And without that, we are nothing anymore, so professionally or even personally. So protect your license with all the due diligence, common sense practices. Just be grateful for our opportunity to serve our communities and our patients. So that's very important privilege and opportunity. So let's not be kind of greedy, like Dr. Gupta said, and slow down, like Dr. Yashwant Reddy said, and use some common sense and simple tactics and strategies. And I think we will be able to kind of manage our professional lives very well. I want to really applaud Dr. Yashwant Reddy and Dr. Kishore Challa, and we have virtual plaques here. Let me read the plaques for each of you. Dr. Kishore Challa, past chair of the Board of Medicine in West Virginia. Thank you for your outstanding contribution as the past president for West Virginia Medical Board, and for welcome to our distinguished panel, speakers panel. Thank you. And I want to also extend my accolades to Dr. Yashwant Reddy for his outstanding contribution as the board member of Ohio Medical Board, and welcome you to our distinguished speakers panel. And next, Dr. Arvind Goyal, my good friend and guide and mentor for many of us, for his outstanding contribution as the past president of Illinois Medical Board, and also welcome you to our speakers club, besides being the speaker of API governing body. Thank you. And Dr. Vinayak Kamath, thank you, sir. This is the first time I had the privilege of listening to you, and I might have met you before. Thank you for being with us, and we're looking forward to your book and your contributions as the past chair of the Georgia Medical Board, and welcome to the Distinguished Speakers Club. And I want to thank my moderators, Dr. Suresh Gupta and Srini Gangasani, for an outstanding job. I also want to thank all the members who joined. Almost 200 people joined today, and it'll be recorded and kept on our website for future viewing and participation. Please join all our future programs as well. And let me do a small plug here for our convention. July 6th to 9th, Philadelphia Marriott downtown. We have a convention coming up. Registrations are starting, and we'll be advertising and promoting that from now onwards. Please join in big numbers, and some of your ideas will be implemented there as well. And so we're looking forward to all of you being there. Thank you so much and have a great day. I'm here in Vegas attending a winter medical conference of the Young Physician section here. And actually at 10 o'clock, we have 11 o'clock here. We have a meeting with Richard Hawkins of American Board of Medical Specialties and Peter Kastafakis of NBME. So some of these topics might be kind of relevant for me to talk to them about. Thank you and have a great day. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you all the speakers. Thank you, members, on this Auspicious Day, joining and giving your time. Yeah, thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.